Welcome to the next edition of the Poznań seminars of media practice and media theory. This time we'll discuss about the freedom of speech in media systems from the non-EU perspective. Why from the new EU perspective? Poland is a member of EU, of course, and in June 2019 we celebrate the third anniversary of the first free Polish election. So it is a great opportunity to discuss and share our experiences on this field. Thanks to our guests from many parts of the world, from Caribbean regions, from Japan, from Nigeria, South Africa, Ukraine and Belarus, and of course from Poland. We will discuss this topic and discuss about challenge to freedom of speech in media system.
Defining freedom of speech in a Caribbean context and also in a context of journalism in the Caribbean is a bit complicated because we are a very varied region with about 20 to 30 different territories, and some are still dependent on other countries and some are independent. And we have various languages and ethnicities. So depending on the history of each country, the laws are quite different, and what their laws mean to the people and how it is executed is very different. I can speak to my country, which is Trinidad and Tobago, and I can speak to our laws. We have freedom of the speech enshrined in our constitution, so journalists should be able to practice that without regulation. Self-regulation. However, freedom of speech doesn't come without responsibility. And so essentially people think freedom of speech may be the ability to say whatever you want without consequences. However, freedom of speech is also, as a journalist, being responsible and being measured and having a duty of care to your public and your fellow journalists within the industry. I'm very worried at this point because we currently have different bills on the books that are being debated in Parliament currently, and they do not make amendments for journalists, particularly bills that can put journalists in jail or charge them fines from $50,000 to $500,000 for the institution. We still have libel laws on our books as well. Currently, we have a very weak system of representation of lobbyists who work on behalf of journalists. And these lobbyists are journalists themselves. So I don't feel there's anyone very strong right now that's trying to represent the interests of journalists. So if these laws are passed, that would mean a very serious environment for journalists, and even more of a chill operating in the industry. So I'm actually very worried right now. I hope that there is continued dialogue and conversation with government representatives so we can add amendments to these possible bills that will be passed. And if that can happen, then I think it'll be a much better environment and we can progress in a much better landscape. If not, then it obviously will be very bleak, but we can always hope for the best and always work for the best.
If I define the freedom of speech in context of Japan, I mentioned in my presentation better that Japan's free speech is influenced by the US sort of scheme. But on the other hand, we have a sort of a bit of a unique development on that. And so it's basically based on the sort of, how can I say, right now the government is not trying to restrict speech so much, and so it's a freedom from government. But to some extent, probably for the future, it will be necessary to have a sort of the point freedom of speech by states or of states or sort of things, and so that. Sincerely, I hope the free speech can be better in my religion, but currently the major problem is like the social media speech, and we are now trying to reconsider the regulation on that. And in terms of that, EU have a sort of a bit strong regulation on this, and so some people in Japan also try to have sort of regulation like EU, but on the other hand, I think Japan also have a bit of the own tradition on the free speech, and so personally, I want to seek a sort of the original model for the regulatory scheme in my country.
For me, freedom of speech is a part of freedom of expression. So it's a freedom to share your ideas with anyone you want, and this idea might be offensive, might be shocking, but it's a freedom. Of course, also we do not need to forget about responsible sharing of idea. I mean hate speech or something like that, because it's very problematic for Ukraine now. I think the future of media in our region is related with the trend all around the world, I mean the digitalization. Now we do not have any regulation about freedom of speech online, but probably we need it, and I hope it would not be so restrictive.